last video, I went over 10 recommendations for horror movies. In this video, I'll be going over 10 of my recommendations for other films that fit within a range of genres. Just like the last video, you've probably seen one or two of these. For those ones, consider rewatching them. Something I should mention is that these aren't necessarily my favorite films ever, just some films I think everyone needs to see at least once. Some of these films are very popular, some are very obscure, but regardless, they all deserve to be seen again and again. I will say there is definitely a recency bias with this list, and maybe in the future I'll have a specific list of film recommendations from before the year 2000. With an overwhelming amount of cinema being created in our time, I don't want the good stuff to get lost. As I'm recommending these movies to people who haven't seen them, I'm going to avoid spoilers. These are all my personal opinions. If you disagree or have something to add, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. I've seen this movie so many times, it's getting ridiculous. It stars Nicolas Cage in one of my favorite roles of his. He and Werner Herzog are the actor-director duo I never knew I needed, but I'm so glad this film exists in the way it does. It was originally written as a reboot of the 1992 film The Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel, and was intended to be played straight as a cocaine-addicted cop abuses his power while solving a murder case. Herzog and Cage take the procedural script off the rails and turn the film into a hilarious satire. Cage's performance is completely deranged. On set, while discussing Cage's character, Herzog told Cage to turn the hog loose and be motivated by the bliss of evil. Nicolas Cage does, in fact, turn the hog loose.
I'm a lieutenant in the police department. I'm in the middle of a homicide investigation. Try to get my prescription, please?
Shoot him again.
What fool?
His soul's still dancing.
There are many points in this film where you can identify the exact point where the screenplay ends and Cage and Herzog start working their magic. I really don't want to say much about the plot of this film, as it's best you experience it in its complete madness yourself. This film is very unassuming on the surface. If you're judging it by its cover, you'll think it's just another 2000s cop procedural schlock picture, but it is so much more than that. It's very likely I'll make a separate video on this film with a thorough analysis, but for now, just watch this as soon as possible. The Straight Story. We all know David Lynch from his iconic TV series and films such as Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, and Eraserhead, but this is a film of his that commonly gets thrown to the wayside. In a collaboration with Disney, Lynch tells the story of a man traveling across the country on a tractor to visit his brother. Lynch has stated this is his most experimental movie, and I can kind of see why. It strays away from the dreamlike quality that Lynch tends to rely on and presents itself plainly and simply. Angelo Badalamenti's soundtrack is heartbreakingly beautiful, and the visuals of wide-open American plains are stunning. This is a very sweet film, maybe the only David Lynch movie you can watch with your mom and dad, or if you just watched Lynch's other film Inland Empire and need to remind yourself there's still some good in the world. About Endlessness. A few years ago, I went down the Roy Andersson rabbit hole. There's an addictive quality to his films for me that keeps me 100% engaged at all times, which is very impressive due to the slow pace of his films. Andersson is known for creating elaborate interior sets utilizing miniatures and forced perspective to give the illusion of shooting on real locations. About Endlessness is a series of about 30 painterly vignettes with narration. It is absurd, comedic, dramatic, emotional, existential, often all at the same time. I feel like I also need to recommend Andersson's other films, particularly Songs from the Second Floor, You the Living, and A Pigeon Sat on a Branch Reflecting on Existence. These films follow a similar format with a series of vignettes connected to each other thematically. Every time I watch a Roy Andersson film, it feels like walking through an art gallery. I don't hear a lot of people talking about his work, so please, watch his collected films and discuss them. There is an insane amount of artistry going on there, and it's a crime to ignore it. Spider. Since it's the way I watched all his films, I think it's best to go into a David Cronenberg movie knowing as little as possible about it beforehand. Most of his films will have one or two major twists that can be spoiled even in the plot summary, so I won't do that here. All I'll say is that this is like Cronenberg's Eraserhead, and it really needs to be seen. Also, to anyone interested in sound design, this is the movie to see and hear. Run, Lola, Run. On the surface, this appears as a generic action film, but it's actually insanely good, experimental, artsy, and extremely stressful. If you just watch Uncut Gems and need another film to give you anxiety so bad you want to rip your own teeth out, watch Run, Lola, Run. The basic premise involves Manny, who is a bagman, needing to deliver a bag containing 100,000 Deutschmarks. He frantically calls his girlfriend Lola, saying he accidentally left the money behind and needs her to run it to him. Otherwise, he'll be killed in 20 minutes if he doesn't have the delivery. I really don't want to give much away because I went into this movie completely blind and had a great and unpredictable experience with it, but I'll just say it deals with time in a really interesting way and plays with themes of chance, fate, and the butterfly effect. While this film has been very influential, I don't see a lot of people talking about it. Solaris. Soderbergh's Solaris is a remake of Tarkovsky's 1972 masterpiece of the same name. While an endeavor to remake a Tarkovsky film may seem like a fool's errand, I think Soderbergh pulls it off surprisingly well. Especially in the scene set on Earth, the film is moody and beautiful and displays some really great direction and cinematography. It's always going to be hard for a remake to compete with an original, but that's why I don't believe in making it a competition. Just because something was remade or rebooted doesn't mean the original is irrelevant. Now there's just more than one way to enjoy the same story. I hadn't seen Tarkovsky's Solaris when I saw this version, so watching its wild concept unfold was an amazing experience. Ragtime. As you may expect from the director of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Amadeus, and Man on the Moon, Ragtime is a trip. Set in New York in the early 1900s, stories overlap and collide, but it's done in such a masterful way, we still keep track of everyone and their motivations. This is a movie that pulls you along for the ride and doesn't let go for its 155-minute runtime. It's pure historical American chaos. The Mill and the Cross. I found this obscure film starring Rutger Hauer while researching for another project, and I fell in love with it immediately. I was already a fan of the 16th century painter Pieter Bruegel's art before watching this, specifically the painting this film is based on, The Procession to Calvary. The film takes place both inside the painting and chronicles Bruegel's process in creating it. It features several vignettes of the lives of the peasant characters seen in the painting, and monologues from Bruegel as he explains the symbolism and structure of it. This film is what Loving Vincent wanted to be, but Loving Vincent could never. It has a slow, meditative, and thoughtful pace, and there's a moment at the end where it all comes together and it's breathtaking. Sennan Asbestos Disaster. Sennan Asbestos Disaster felt to me like an epic story in the classical sense, almost biblical. This real-life event covered the depths of human emotion and many years of people's lives, as a group of people who have been affected by asbestos poisoning seek compensation and apology from the Japanese government. Whatever the opposite of escapism is, that is this movie, with much of this film's power coming from the staggering runtime. Watching these events unfold for 3.5 hours made me feel like I was along for the journey with these people. You feel every emotion they do. This film is about a group of people fighting for justice, and it feels more heroic than any superhero movie you would see in theaters today. I feel that many fiction films could learn a lesson from Sennan Asbestos Disaster in the way it presents its characters dealing with the conflict. Its nuance, its contradictions, everything about it makes it one of the greatest human stories ever documented. John Carter. Last but not least, Disney's 2012 box office flop, John Carter. I don't know what I was expecting from this film, but I definitely wasn't expecting as good of a movie as this is. If you're a fan of Avatar, Dune, Star Wars, or Planet of the Apes, this movie feels like all of those combined. There's a reason behind that. The books this film is based on, the John Carter of Mars series by Edgar Rice Burroughs, is what inspired nearly every space science fiction story that came after it. I love that this movie doesn't rely on big-name celebrities, and its 1960s sci-fi styling really makes it feel like it's from another time. This movie is the 60s classic that never existed. I understand why this movie flopped. I don't really think many people want to see a movie just called John Carter. I mean, who is that? It doesn't really convey sci-fi space epic the way a title like Star Wars does. But from watching the movie, you can tell that a lot of love and care went into it. The people making it definitely had a lot of passion for what they were doing. And Willem Dafoe really works as this green alien guy. If you didn't see this when it was out in theaters, you owe it to Andrew Stanton and the production team to watch it. So log on to your parents' Disney Plus account and immerse yourself in the wild and wondrous world of speculative science fiction Mars from 100 years ago. Like, the idea of what people thought Mars was like 100 years ago, and done as if it was made in the 1960s, but with advanced CGI technology of the 2010s. I know, it's kind of high concept, but you'll get it. If you have any movie recommendations for me, please let me know. I'm always looking for more obscure or less appreciated film. Until next time.